The world is changing. History is unfolding. And we have a front row seat. While Operation Epic Fury dominates the headlines, President Trump just dropped a bombshell about the nation of Cuba. The communist regime is collapsing. And what's coming next will reshape the entire political map of the Americas in ways we haven't seen since the end of the Cold War. Stick with me to the very end of this video because we're going to see a pattern emerging all across Latin America that has the political right celebrating and the woke left absolutely panicked. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you make sense of the madness with breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. So you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Analysts across the globe are all saying it. We've simply never seen anything like this. Libertà, freedom. Freedom, it's the Braveheart chant. The arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has been catastrophic for the communist regime in Cuba. The fuel shortage has brought daily life on the island to a complete standstill. Garbage is piling up on the streets because the trucks can't run. Rolling blackouts across the entire country are now more and more frequent. Food shortages, medicine shortages. Nearly 11 million people on an island with no money, no oil, no allies left. And the people are rising up. And Trump is answering their cries.
He quickly turned to Cuba. He said, without being asked, Cuba is going to fall pretty soon, by the way, but Cuba is going to fall. They want to make a deal so badly. And I asked, how so? He said, they want to make a deal, so I'm going to put Marco over there, and we'll see how that works. But we're really focused on this one now, meaning Iran. We've got plenty of time on Cuba.
And this isn't just talk. The Telegraph is now reporting that Trump is negotiating an actual deal with the Cuban regime, an off-ramp that would allow Diaz-Canel, their president, and the Castro family to remain in Cuba without facing prosecution in exchange for relinquishing power. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the son of Cuban immigrants, is personally leading these negotiations. And his counterpart on the Cuban side is not the current president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, but Raul Guillermo Rodriguez, the grandson of Raul Castro, the previous president, who's 94 years old, by the way, if you could believe it. So we're talking about direct negotiations between the son of Cuban exiles and the grandson of the revolution's founding family. I mean, you could not possibly script this better. And that's not random. The Trump administration views the elder Raul Castro as Cuba's true decision maker. Even though he's 94 and not officially in power, they believe he's the one the buck stops with, not their current president, Diaz-Canel, which is why they're basically bypassing Havana entirely and dealing directly with the Castros. The deal would involve lifting certain sanctions and easing restrictions on American travel to Cuba, access to Cuban ports and energy sectors for U.S. companies, tourism reopening. It would include an exit strategy for President Diaz-Canel, allowing him to step down without prosecution. The Castro family would be allowed to stay on the island. This is the crucial sweetener. This is why this deal will most likely happen. Rather than demanding exile or punishment, the deal would let the Castros remain in Cuba with immunity. It'll certainly provoke some outrage and ire among Miami exiles, but it does mirror the very successful Venezuela approach. And of course, an end to the oil embargo, which is basically starving the island at this point. If there is no deal, the embargo remains in place, the island's degeneration continues, and it'll only be a matter of time before Cuban officials are sitting in a New York prison cell next to Nicolas Maduro, who apparently is singing like a bird as we speak. He's reportedly giving up tons of information on the narco-terrorist network in the Caribbean. So Trump is basically making the Cuban regime an offer they can't refuse. Now, Cuba's UN ambassador is characteristically dismissing all of this. He's saying it's mere speculation, and he insisted Cuba would only negotiate with mutual respect, equal conditions, and the promise of non-interference, blah, 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 blah. That's diplomatic speak for saying, yeah, we're screwed. Because you'll notice that the regime has yet to even remotely deny these talks are happening. And Trump keeps publicly confirming the talks are happening. So that suggests Havana knows exactly which way this is heading, and they're just doing their best to save face in the process. So that's where we are. Cuba is completely isolated, economically collapsing, militarily irrelevant. And now, for the first time in 65 years, they're sitting at a negotiating table with the United States discussing the terms of their own surrender. We are living in absolutely unprecedented times. Don't blink, because you might miss history in the making. It's happening that fast and that frequently. It's absolutely astonishing. But what's about to happen to Cuba and what already happened in Venezuela is actually all part of a much bigger geopolitical realignment that's happening all throughout Latin America. What we're witnessing right now, from Caracas to Havana to Buenos Aires, or from Buenos Aires, I should say, to San Salvador, is really nothing less than a civilizational realignment of the Western Hemisphere. And it's absolutely staggering in its scope. Wait till you see this. But first, gang, a note about your health. You know, one of the biggest health crises facing America right now, it's not just heart disease or diabetes, it's obesity. According to national health data, more than 40% of American adults are now considered obese, and nearly 3/4 are overweight. Now, that's not just about appearance. It's tied to higher risks of diabetes, heart disease, fatigue, and metabolic problems that affect millions of families. But here's the important point most people miss. Weight struggles are not simply about willpower. That's key. New research shows that weight regulation is deeply connected to how your brain, metabolism, and appetite signals communicate with each other. So when those signals get out of balance, your body literally pushes you towards cravings and overeating and storing fat. That's why the wellness company created the unique tirzepatide B6 and B12 formula. Tirzepatide works by targeting two important metabolic receptors, GLP-1 and GIP, which help regulate appetite, satiety, and metabolic efficiency. Research has even shown that this mechanism can reduce cravings and change how the brain responds to high sugar and high fat foods. And here's what makes this approach different. Instead of weekly injections, the wellness company offers fast-absorbing sublingual tablets that dissolve under the tongue, giving you a 3-month supply in a simple daily format. Plus, the formula includes highly absorbable vitamins B6 and B12, which help support cellular energy production, something many people struggle with while trying to lose weight. This isn't about extreme dieting. It's about helping restore balance between the gut, the brain, and your metabolism, so healthier habits become easier to maintain. Now, if you want to learn more, head to twc.health/Turley and use code Turley to get $52 off plus free shipping for U.S. residents only. I want to pull back and give you the big picture here, because Cuba isn't happening in a vacuum. Think about where we were just 2 years ago. Latin America was dominated by the so-called pink tide. So here in this image, you see it in red. Okay, that red means liberal. That red means left wing. It's not conservative. The continent was liberally covered by a wave of left-wing governments aligned with China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba. Venezuela, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Honduras, all governed by leftists, all hostile to the United States, many of them openly aligned with America's enemies. And now, look at the map today. That blue is all conservative. It's all right-wing. Nine Latin American countries are now governed by right-wing presidents and administrations. Javier Milei in Argentina just won a landslide in their midterms last October. Daniel Noboa, reelected in Ecuador, Rodrigo Paz in Bolivia. And one of his first acts, interestingly enough, was restoring diplomatic relations with Israel. Jose Antonio Cast in Chile, the most conservative president since Pinochet, elected with 60% of the vote. Laura Fernandez Delgado, she just won in Costa Rica on a crime-fighting, conservative, pro-life platform. Osfura in Honduras, who's already said he wants to deepen ties with the United States and review Honduras' relationship with China. Santiago Peña in Paraguay, Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, and of course now Venezuela, while not right-wing, certainly not right-wing, but nevertheless aligning with the United States. That's not a political shift. That is a tectonic plate moving. And it's not done. I mean, look what's coming. In Brazil, they have their elections, their presidential elections this year. Flavio Bolsonaro, the eldest son of Jair Bolsonaro, he's leading Lula by nearly 10 points in the latest polling. I mean, this is the largest country in South America, the largest economy. And Bolsonaro's son looks poised to take the place of his father and hopefully bail him out of jail as well. In Colombia, they just held legislative elections this past Sunday. The right wing is surging there. Petro, Colombia's first ever leftist president, the former guerrilla, he's been an absolute disaster. He's cycled through, I think it was like 60 ministers in 4 years. His coalition is fractured. The presidential election is in May, and the right is expected to come roaring back there. In Peru, the presidential election is April 12th, and a right-wing candidate is heavily favored to win. So that's the larger context of what's happening here. This is a seismic political realignment throughout the Western Hemisphere. Again, not all right-wing, but all right aligned, as we might say. They're aligned with the United States, and that's what's so key. You often hear of American exceptionalism, but what we're seeing happening here in this realignment is American civilizationalism. This is about civilizational gravity. You know, for decades, the Western Hemisphere, it was the one region where the liberal international order was supposed to be unchallengeable. This was America's backyard. But liberalism only ended up hollowing out our hemispheric dominance. So the Monroe Doctrine, in effect, got replaced by globalism. And as a result, for the last 20 years, we watched as country after country in Latin America drifted toward China, toward Russia, toward Iran, toward Cuba's revolutionary model. We watched as hostile regimes open their doors to Chinese infrastructure, Russian military advisors, and Iranian-backed Hezbollah cells operating out of what's called the tri-border area between Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. What Trump is doing, whether he articulates it this way or not, is re-civilizationalizing, that's a big word, re-civilizationalizing the Western Hemisphere. He's revivifying the Monroe Doctrine now as the Donroe Doctrine. He's not just flipping governments from left to right. He's reestablishing the gravitational pull of American civilization over its own neighborhood. Sam Huntington would call it, he's reestablishing the United States as a core state for all these satellite states around us. Venezuela wasn't just a regime change. It was a signal. It told every leftist government in the hemisphere, align with America's enemies, and you will be removed. Cuba's the confirmation of that signal. And the elections sweeping the continent from Santiago to La Paz to Brasilia are all the collective civilizational response.